Okay, well, this is Tom Tresser of the TIF Illumination Project explaining a little bit about TIFs. And what we're saying are they're created for economic development to help build something in so-called blighted communities. But we feel that's a loaded term, and you have to ask who blighted who. So in Chicago, sadly, we have a long history of racist practices, blockbusting, redlining, home contract buying, closing public schools, over policing, on and on and on. So a community that needs development just didn't kind of happen. You know what I mean? Something happened to them. But this TIF stuff doesn't really interrogate that, but we want to lift that up before we even get any further, because it's kind of like the man, the master, the machine, the whatever, the powers that be. We're kind of trusting them to fix what they broke. You know what I mean? And so we just have to be mindful a little bit of this, because there's a huge love affair with TIFs that we really have to sort of interrogate. So to have a TIF, in most cases, you must prove that your community is blighted. And there's usually a checklist of factors. In Illinois, there's 13 factors. If you can prove 5 of them, congratulations, you're blighted. You may have a TIF now. And then a project that's created inside of TIF boundaries may get public money up to 30% of its development costs. But it's important to know that these costs can only be used for building. So if in your work or in your world, people are telling you about what they need to be, quote, developed, doesn't involve a building, but it has to do with like people, like teachers, nurses, sports coaches, artists, librarians, et cetera, the TIF may not help you. You can't hire staff in most TIFs. It's for the building of a thing. And these TIFs last for 23 years by and large. Again, it's a little different in each jurisdiction. And here's a very important point that is often overlooked. The TIF money is supposed to be spent where it's collected. And we'll talk about that in a bit. Okay, that's a little bit about TIFs. Now, here's how it goes in Chicago and Illinois, and I'm going to say it's probably the same in most other places, with some filigree. So this is a real TIF in Chicago's African-American West Side neighborhood called the Midwest TIF. It was started in 2000, so it has another year to go. Now you see they draw the line around it, and part of the mystery of TIFs is the boundary drawing. But be that as it may, now the TIF is created, and let's say there's 1,000 properties in this TIF. The county will tell us that. They know the value of each of those properties. And we're talking about every property, whether it's a commercial or private property. Even a vacant land is still worth something. The county will say, okay, of those 1,000 properties, totally inside these little borders, this is how much money they're generating in property taxes. So remember, property taxes, that's the thing we got to put a tattoo on our foreheads here. Keeping track of property taxes. So there's $1,000 of property taxes being collected when we start this whole process. That's a super important number. That's called the base. That's important to remember, because in Illinois, that base is frozen for the life of the TIF, or 23 years. So this is the famous diagram. You may have seen it in other discussions of urban policy or TIFs, the famous triangle. So what that represents is the blue at the bottom. That's the base. That's the amount of money that was generated by the TIF before this whole crazy thing got started. And that $1,000 goes to the units of local government that are supposed to collect and receive property taxes. So I don't know how it is by you down in Miami, but in Chicago, the #1 recipient of property taxes is public education. Is that the case by you as well?
I think it might be. I have to look it up. I actually have someone shared with me the breakdown. I'm not a homeowner, so
Okay.
I don't look at my own bill, but
Okay,
I think
well,
it probably is, or the county. The
okay,
county, that's where they get most of their
I
money.
can't tell you guys. I did some initial snooping, and Miami, Florida, uh, definitely has TIF, and
Yes, yeah, I just looked it up. It funds the CRAs.
funds
cool.
the
Yeah.
CRAs and used in
Mhm.
conjunction with it. And actually, depending on when the TIF was established, it could be between 30 and 40 years
Mm-hmm.
for its duration.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and
So
I will,
I sent you
just,
all an article
okay.
in your email.
Cool.
Okay, perfect. And I will say too, like for us, thank you for this. We have Miami-Dade County. And then if people happen to live in a city, we have like a lot of about half the people are in unincorporated
Mm-hmm.
Dade County. So they're not in a city, but if they're in a city too, then they're getting taxed twice on their
Twice,
property.
right.
Yeah.
Well, we're just gonna put a theory out there that your property taxes are capturing at least 50% of the dollar for the public schools. In some places, it's as high as 65 cents. It all depends on the overall state of taxing of your state. Like Illinois is a regressive state. We don't have a progressive income tax. So in some states,
And
you know,
Florida has no income tax.
so there you go.
Yes, we're also regressive. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm gonna theorize that the pressure on the property tax to fund schools is strong in Florida as it is here in Illinois, which is another cause for racism and inequity, obviously, because if you live in a community that's got wealth and many nice houses and a mall or whatever, it throws off much property tax. Your schools will be flush. They'll look like little college campuses. But if your community is of modest means, the housing is not so valuable, it's kind of just puttering along, they're not throwing off all that great property taxes, and your schools will suffer accordingly.
So that's the crux of it right there, of why it's institutional racism.
Mm-hmm.
Because it purports to be colorblind because you're not, designating a racial groups, but ignoring racial history and the context, you come up with these vastly different kind of outcomes because the TIF doesn't have the same deleterious effect on an area that has surplus.
Right, and we're going to show you that that's kind of at it's sort of the hidden core of the problems here.
And that's because the TIF needs to be spent where the money's collected. So
That's
that's the
right.
inequity. Okay.
Exactly. It's anti-distributional, which is counter to progressive economics. So, so what happens is the county, which is counting up the money every year, has to do this little procedure. So here we are in year 5 of this TIF, and now instead of $1,000, the property taxes out here are 5,000. So there's been some growth. In other words, there've been some new properties built. Property values have maybe gone up a bit. So the delta between the base, this is right here, right? And the 5, what is that delta? Or what's the difference?
4,000.
Right. That's how much money the TIF collects. It's a separate bank account, if you will, that captures that 4,000 and therefore intercepts it, if you want to think of it that way, or skimming. It doesn't make its way to the schools, the county, the city. Like in Chicago, we also have a water district and also our county, our city colleges, for example. And our libraries are all on the property tax bill. So any entity that's on the property tax bill is getting ripped off here, if you can follow. And so now here it is in year 20. It's like we're way in the future. And now things have gone up in that little community, that little TIF district I showed you. And now the property values are 20,000, right? And now the delta is what? Between
19.
Right. Right. And again, that's collected by the TIF. It doesn't find its way into the channels that we're supposed to be thinking about here. And this happens just on and on every single year until the TIF expires. And that's what that gold part is. Now the TIF is no longer there. So all the property tax that's collected in that district now goes to where they're supposed to go.
And in 23 years, a lot of the people aren't there anymore. That's the experience that
It's
we
a
have.
generational
Yeah.
thing, you know?
It's a generational theft.
Now, what we say is that money in the base, that's on the books. So that will be part of the budgeting that you and your colleagues are looking at when you're trying to figure out, like, oh, the mayor put out this budget, or the county board president put out this budget for 2023. Let's take a look at it. Do we like it? Do we disagree with it? Oh, we like this part. We hate this part. You know what? You know, you're making do with what you've been shown. And that's what you can react to through the advocacy process. But this stuff that we're talking about right now is not on the books. It will not show up in that budgeting because it's idiosyncratic and it depends on the amount of property tax coming in that fill up the coffers of these TIFs. And then the spending is triggered by the mayor and that executive department. And whatever projects come before them that they bless can receive this money. It's usually a very secretive process and difficult to track. So that's why we say that TIF money is off the books or it is a slush fund.
So yes, and so let's be clear here. This collection, this delta, it goes in the TIF pot, but as the previous slide suggests, it's supposed to go to the areas it was extracted from. Supposed to, but it is not a binding thing, and that's not what happens, not in Chicago. So we'll end up with the absurdity of having these things that are funding development downtown, monuments, parks in the downtown area that are being funded essentially with money from the poorest, that's been diverted from the poorest areas in the city, at the same time that we're closing schools.
Yeah.
So in Chicago, as I say, this is where the dollar of your property tax is supposed to go. 56 cents is supposed to go to the public schools. 18 cents of the dollar goes to operating the city, 8 cents to the county of Cook, 6 cents to the public parks, 3 cents to the city colleges, and 2 cents to the libraries. But that's assuming that it all reaches there. So what is actually happening is, like in Vegas, if the mafia is managing a casino and collects $1 million in revenue from the gamblers, it keeps $100,000 for itself by throwing it in the closet. And it tells the owner, hey, we had a great night. We took in 900,000. Oh, wow, that's a great night. Yeah, but you don't know that the mafia guy has 100,000 in the closet that you never see. So this is skimming off the top. And so the public schools do not get 56 cents of the dollar because of TIFs. And everybody therefore suffers. Okay. These are the distinctions that create a TIF in Illinois. Usually you prove that something is aged or obsolescent or there are code violations or something like that. It's very easy to prove, and it virtually is so elastic as to allow for pretty much any spot in the state of Illinois to be blighted, including our business district and the hottest retail area in the entire city are all TIFed, even though to the naked eye they look pretty prosperous.
So Tom, can I just tell her the latest thing is our mayor has floated a proposal to use TIFs to do development of quote unquote mixed income housing in what is part of our financial district downtown.
Right.
It basically subsidizing developers.
Wow.
Right.
And that's a black mayor.
So this is our LaSalle Street area that Phil's talking about. That's our Wall Street. All the banks are headquartered there. Financial services are there. I mean, fancy restaurants, you name it. That's been a TIF district.
City Hall.
I mean, TIFs were used to create some of the office towers that are there right now. And now the Mayor Lightfoot is proposing to use TIFs again to convert some of those buildings because they've been suffering under COVID that they're high vacancy rates. So now we're going to bail out those same developers or the guys who sold their buildings were sold to by turning them into high-end apartments. So part of what the TIF Illumination Project does and what we do with all the people we work with is to try to do some basic counting, which is often harder than it looks. So in Chicago for 2020, there was 136 TIF districts. Oh my goodness, that's up 30% of the
That's
entire city.
crazy.
And
That's
we only
crazy.
have 77 community areas.
That's insane.
Look how dense it is and how they touch, including that giant red one on the north side of the city, which follows our rapid transit elevated line. It's called the Red Line Super TIF. That means every property inside those colored spaces are under the TIF jurisdiction, and their property taxes are being stolen from out from under them. And furthermore, in Illinois anyway, as long as two TIFs touch, money can move from one to the other in a strange process called porting, which adds yet another layer of secrecy and obfuscation as money is moving around inside this scam. It's like a scam inside of a scam. Now, outside of the city of Chicago, for the county of Cook, we got another 311 of these bad boys for a total of 447 in the county of Cook. We like humor at the Civic Lab. And I'm fond of these old monster movies. I don't know if you ever saw the old monster movie where the scientist robs the graveyards and he stitches together the creature, right? And he says, "Don't worry, I have it under control. I will control him. He will serve me." And then you know what? The monster bursts his chains. He breaks the scientist's neck and then he runs out and he sets the village on fire. Oh dear. Well, it got away from us. That's kind of how we look at TIFs. So I say there's 136 active TIFs currently. They took $820 million off the table in 2020. That's a lot of money. They spent $415 million again in 2020. So money in and money out. And since TIFs came to Chicago, they took a total of $10 billion. And our analysis says there's the politics to this because of Mayor Richard M. Daley. That's the second Daley. We had father and son running the city for over 40 years. Unprecedented in American politics. But he was the king of TIFs. He served as mayor from 1989 to 2011. And you can see how the rise of TIFs were almost like a 45-degree angle straight up. And we have an explanation for that. You know, in other contexts, we could certainly talk about that. But there's a political reason why this is a very loaded and radioactive subject that no mayor wants to be investigated about. They don't want to give up this money, and they don't even want to talk about it. Back to the monster movies. Well, like Godzilla trashing Tokyo, we think TIFs have that bad effect on places where they're used. And the biggest thing that the Civic Lab does is reveal the amount of money sitting in the TIF accounts at the end of every year. Now, I don't know about how it is by you, but here in this place, we hear a lot about how the city is broke. You know what I mean? Like we have no money for you. Do you hear that? that kind of dialogue?
Yeah, I tell people never to believe that. We're in like the richest country in the world, you know. Every
Yeah,
state is
don't
rich.
believe it. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Don't believe that.
But we have no money for you, though.
No, not
Yeah.
for you.
Yeah.
That's
Not
what
for
they're
your
saying.
community.
That's what politicians say. Yes.
So this is a neoliberal construct of austerity and looking at government as a kind of, you know, I have 5 crumbs here and I only have 10 crumbs, so you can have 3 crumbs. You know, it's that kind of scarcity, austerity mentality, government as a business. All those models we completely reject out of hand. And why this work is so powerful is because this number that I'm going to reveal to you right now just blows all that up. So as I say, part of what the TIF Illumination Project does is is look at all the TIF districts in the jurisdiction where we are working. And one of the things we want to know is, aside from like how many of these things are there, et cetera, is how much money, which you remember is your property taxes, are sitting in the TIF accounts at the end of the year. This should be a widely known number, but believe me, the cities do not want you to know this. And for Chicago in 2020, the answer is $1.9 billion. That's how much money was sitting in our TIF accounts at the close of business of 2020. And now we've done this, as I say, this presentation dozens and dozens and dozens of times, online and offline. When I get to this point, there's usually a collective gasp. Like, what? Are you know, people, you can hear people smacking their heads, grinding their teeth. And I ask, have you ever heard of this number before? And 100% of the time, the answer is no. We are the ones for the first time explaining or revealing this number. And as you can imagine, it leads to a lot of upset, many questions for sure, which none of which we can't answer them all, but it releases a lot of what I would call civic energy, let's put it that way, which is awesome to build on as an organizer. Now, if that's how bad it is here in Chicago, what about the state of Illinois? Well, we can tell you that in 2019 rather, there were almost 1,400 TIFs across 580 municipalities. What the heck? And they took almost $2 billion statewide. And since TIFs came to Illinois, statewide, it's almost $26 billion. So now, by doing this work, you have something to tell your colleagues in every other part of the state, rural, suburban, urban. I would even say working with civic organizations that don't even share your politics.
That's right.
They might even be more libertarian or more conservative in nature in their, you know, how they pursue their politics. But what they have in common, what we can make in common with many allies is this is robbery. This is crony capitalism. This is secret stuff that needs to be exposed. So it's really powerful. Now, if that's just one state, what about the whole USA? Well, I wish I could tell you with authority how bad it is, but interestingly, there is no one place to go. And I think that tells you something, because in America, there's usually some body, the Treasury Department, the Ford Foundation for sick puppies, somebody is studying every darn thing, isn't there? You know, to tell you a number if you're interested in, you know, whatever your healthcare, housing, disease, whatever. There's somebody studying that subject and can tell you, you know, what the situation is across the country, but not with TIFs. But our own estimation says there are 40,000 TIFs extracting $40 billion a year. And if you follow the rule of thumb, that $1 of property tax is supposed to go, 50 cents at least, is supposed to go to United States public schools. Our school children are being robbed of $20 billion a year. All right, I'm going to stop there.
Yeah, let me, you know,
let that sink in.
The way you ended that there, Tom, was really effective. And the thing is, they'll say that there's no national study about this, but clearly, because of how they've been disseminated throughout the country, starting in California, which is now the only state that doesn't have it. They repealed theirs by referendum, voter referendum. These, as you know, through the Council of Mayors, police, there's all of these national associations that spread these quote unquote best practices. And that's clearly happened here with respect to legislatures and different bodies in municipalities and counties, because there's no way it can all just be adopted like that from state to state.
So what do you think? Is this something you're interested in maybe getting into, or?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was kind of just Googling TIF Miami to see what comes up. So what comes up is our community redevelopment agencies, which are kind of run through the county. It says clearly on the website that they're funded by TIFs. TIFs are tax increment, literally what you explained to me, like it says here. And then I was looking at we have a few CRAs run by the county, some by City of Miami, so they have those listed. And those are like, I was looking to see if they can do the transfer thing, like that you said with your adjacent properties, but it looks like they cannot.
Mhm.
So they have to use it. And in fact, on the City of Miami website, or the City of Miami CRA website, they talk about it's good because it's being used for this particular neighborhood, and if not, if we didn't exist, it would go back. Well, if the CRA didn't exist, all that money would go back to the city and be divided 5 ways, in neighborhoods that don't need the money. There's 5 districts in the city.
Mhm.
But I guess given that, probably the next step for me is to look into these like CRA budgets, like how much do they have? And then I know CRAs can be like very controversial. For example, I'm in the City of Miami Beach, like where South Beach is and all of that. We have a more like low income neighborhood called North Beach, but basically it just has less hotels.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, and so the folks in North Beach were really fighting being labeled as slum and blight. They were super upset. This was just a couple of years ago. So they were like, we're not slum and blight. We just don't have all this like hotels and stuff that South Beach has. So I think probably looking into like the projects they're doing too, and then like the amount of money that is being
Yes.
not in the full budget. But yeah, anyways, I'm really interested in it. But it did say for us, it's like it says 95% of it stays in the CRA, only 5% goes back to the general city and county budget. That being said though,
I mean, they speak of it
um,
in glowing terms, and I
yeah.
think it warrants further investigation. That's the whole thing, and transparency.
Yeah, and that being said, there are some CRAs that are not in areas of slum and blight. Like for example, I don't know if you've been to South Beach in Miami, but like
Yeah.
Lincoln Road. Have you been on Lincoln Road? It's like a shopping mall.
Yes.
Like that's a CRA, or like downtown, like Adrian Arch Center, which is like the big concert hall that was funded by a CRA.
Mhm.
So although I don't know if that one's still in existence, so I think it would be, outlining those ones that don't really, like Miami
Right.
Beach has like some of the highest
Right.
tax value, like especially
Yeah.
Yeah. I
that
mean,
area.
I think
Yeah,
you'll open Pandora's box by
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so one way to crack the nut is to pick one specific community or municipality, if it's North Miami or Central, however they're all kind of clustered together, to pick one that is a meaning to your people and
Yeah.
just thoroughly attack it. It's like, we want to know everything about these CRAs. When were they formed? Who is on the governing boards of them? And so who picks them? Is it the mayor, but the governor, whatever, the county commissioner? And who are those people? And what are their affiliations? So they should all be known with their resumes open and to reveal any conflicts of interest. Oh, they're all real estate agents, or they're all the mayor's brother-in-law, or whatever, whatever
Yeah.
it shows. And then from the day this thing was created, how much money has it captured?
Yeah.
And where has it been spent? And we want to know every dime. So if this thing got started 10 years ago, there's 10 years of records, and it should all be, and then and then kind of like keep a diary of like, how easy is it to find this information, because this is all potential press material for you.
Yeah, I will say Florida, it's very easy to find information. We have
Oh,
something called the Sunshine Law where
oh, good, good,
everything
good.
needs to be transparent. That's why we have all these crazy news stories like Florida man, Florida woman. It's just because we have no privacy. Like you can find my cell phone and
okay.
address.
Well,
Like, yeah,
that's good.
and even elected officials, every single thing they say has to be, everything is public basically.
Well,
So yes, that would
that's
be easy
very
to do.
awesome. And, and, but I still have a theory that
Some things are hidden.
notwithstanding what you just said,
Mm,
when you try to crack this nut, it'll be just, oh, I can't quite crack
yeah.
it, so we'll see. Maybe your jurisdiction might be the one that is the outlier.
Yeah.
But who got all this money? So if there's 10 projects that were created, whether it's an art center or a drugstore or whatever, high rise, whatever it is, who owns those projects? Who are the developers? So again, how easy is it to find? And then when you find, you kind of sit down, you look at it on the table or put it up on the board and step back and go, well, what have we learned? What does this say? Are we happy with what we found, or have we discovered some nefarious doings here?
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
that's how we roll. And um, part of the other thing is to then make a story out of the data. So part of what we counsel is, again, you're thinking ahead about maps and testimony, and the data will reveal, like in Detroit, they found that the developer of one of the projects that got a lot of money is sort of a really a bad actor, and all you had to do is say that guy's name and show his face, and everybody was like totally revolted, and it was almost like a symbol for
Mm,
how Detroit was being pillaged, and sandblasted. All you had to do is show a picture of him, like with a wine glass or such, a champagne glass for some high rolling party from the society papers. Juxtapose that against the closing of a school, and the organizers found that spoke to their people with very little, wording, and then, with the facts later. So
Almost like popular education or something.
yeah,
yeah.
to make it real, to say, this is the guy that profited off of this nonsense that we're showing you. Anyway, that's kind of what we do.
So do you all like, in what ways do you support municipalities like, or you know what I mean, like people outside of Chicago and Illinois area in doing this?
Well, we're available for hire. So we would consult with you as we did with some of our other partners. And that could look like a couple of different things. So for one, it could be this kind of thing that we just did right now. I only gave you like a half of it. The other half is the examination of the policy problems that we see that all are organizing hooks. So for every bullshit thing we call out, there's at least 2 or 3 ways to organize around it and
Mm-hmm.
raise some hell. So we go into that. We would also explain to you a little bit about what we're doing in other cities, just to sort of tickle your brain a little bit, that other people in similar situations, have tackling this beast in a different way. They're kind of different fires being put out multiple places. So that would be for your staff or your board or basically anybody, your whole organization. And then there'd be kind of a noodling, like, okay, so how do you want to go? Do you want to take one city, or like or the whole county, or what's your appetite? And let's set out an agenda, and then together we would sort of train you up and work with people. Maybe you've got data experts already on your crew and they kind of already plugged in. They know where to put their hands on everything. It's still interesting to have a process by where to start, and then to sort of keep track of where the data is not. So
Yeah.
you keep expecting to see something, and then you're sort of like looking like, wait a minute, all right, let me call my buddy over at the Department of the Treasury. No, that didn't do anything. Well, let me Google this. Let me call my state rep. And so you kind of go on this like a treasure hunt. I'll call my friend in Tallahassee. Maybe she knows the secret, where all these documents are hidden. And you kind of have that experience, and you may get lucky. Like in Illinois, there is, at the controller's level, at the state controller, there is a data warehouse where all the TIFs of every municipality are parked. But it's only for the to 3 years, like this year and 2 years before that. So then you find, a partial victory. Yay, we found some nuggets. But what about the first 12 years? Where do I, you know what I'm saying? It's kind of like that. And then you're keeping track of that to realize, okay, here's what we need. We need to either FOIA this stuff or we have to lawyer up. And again, this is all kind of, you know, as it needs to be. But that's all kind of what happens in that first pass of a few months. And then we reassess to say, okay, how do you want to visualize this? What do you know, what is it, how does it match with other campaigns that you're doing? Like you're already doing community work around policing or something. So you already have 5 meetings scheduled. How does this connect? If you're talking about money, is there a connection here that you want to make? So you're thinking about, oh, yeah, I can see how this might work for our 2023 organizing campaign, or no, maybe this is something new altogether. You know what I mean? And then that's kind of it, you know. So that's the road that we've passed with our friends in Detroit and a few other places.
And
Cool.
we're,
And
we're building up to really have a national network around this because we are seeing so many similarities. And as we see different kinds of jurisdictions and different ways of doing this, patterns emerge. So it's building a compendium of knowledge that each new place that we go, we know more about the variety of ways this is implemented.
yeah, absolutely. That
And
makes a
we'd
lot
like,
of
and
sense.
you know, we'd like to convene, I think maybe in the new year, perhaps maybe as late as early February, somewhere in there, a national table where you could meet all these other people that we've worked with and get to know each other, because you're all sort of pulling the same oar, you know, against the currents, and they're all operating in places of a lot of racist practice and a lot of hidden shit, you know, where the people are not being told what was happening, and there's a lot of similar notes.
Yeah, and there's a lot of potential there for kind of cross pollination between uh, not only just jurisdictions but interest areas. As this bleeds over and you see the connections between the policy areas, we think this funding thing is at the linchpin of a lot of our work, and this is one of
Absolutely.
the hidden levers we think.
And the kind of think about it another way too. I think you're already kind of in the space of building a certain civic muscle, a literary civic muscle, with a cadre of people from your community who just say, yeah, I'll give you 2 hours a week and turn us loose on the school budget, turn us loose on the housing budget, turn us loose on the whatever, how the budgets are, the grants that are being given out to arts organizations. And we will map all those too. And once people get a sense of that, you know, kind of sneaky, detective-y, journalistic-y, busybody, like, you know, hey, it's my money anyway. I kind of have a right to know. It's sort of it kind of becomes fun in a strange way, and I think empowering.
And it's very potent, and as again Tom alluded to before, it's really a nonpartisan kind of opportunity it opens up. And as everything's kind of changing, I think people that saw themselves as solidly middle class are now kind of feeling the slide and seeing more common ground with folks maybe they didn't think they had.
Absolutely.
So, do you have any questions or comments?
I think I'm gonna like look into this. You're reminding me, a long time ago I had met with a professor who was researching CRAs and like the money that they use. So I think that'll be our real like linchpin here. And then yeah, I know for us, like we typically don't have like we're not like slush with funding. So at least in the policy work that we do. So if you know of any funders that are like interested in supporting this work and other, you know, like in different cities and stuff like that, that would be great to know too. But I think for the interim, I'll kind of look into
Okay,
this a little bit more locally and see
awesome.
see what's there.
Okay, well, how about this? when we're done, I will stop recording now. And then I'll make this recording available to you, and then we'll circle back in a little bit.